Welcome to the Trainwell podcast, inspiring you to move more, get stronger, and have fun. On today's episode, we are interviewing the co-founders of Trainwell, CEO Matt Spettel and CTO Gabe Madonna. We learned so much on this episode and had such a good time talking to them. Not only did we learn about them personally, but we learned how they met, we learned how they developed the idea for Trainwell, and you're going to really just hear their passion behind this app, what they hope to achieve, and their vision for the future.
You guys are in for a real treat, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the interview with our co-founders, Matt and Gabe.
All right, so let's do a cherry in a pit. Matt, why don't you start us off? Give us a cherry in a pit, a highlight and a bummer.
Let's see. Okay, for just this week or for today or
today? Yeah, either.
Okay. Cherry is I've been taking piano lessons at Carnegie Mellon again, and so I have one of those today, and I'm excited for it because I always realize how bad I am at piano and how much better I could be. So that's always fun. And a pit is just dealing with some good old relationship struggles this week. So powering through all that. Gabe has been my therapist already, so I thank him for that. But yeah, just life stuff, but can't complain.
We love a good relationship struggle, you know, it's always a fun time. Gabe, cherry in a pit.
Definitely less existential. I was like, I got Invisalign yesterday, and
Nice.
They're like, you are allowed to eat food for 4 hours a day. That is it. And so my pit is definitely that I can't just like be eating on every single meeting because I have to like limit my food intake to a very small subset of the day. But I'm also going to say my cherry is for you guys that have to deal with watching me eat on meetings is you no longer have to do that. So
I was just thinking that, like, now I don't have to be so fearful every time I see Gabe eating on a meeting. I'm terrified he's going to choke. There's a backstory there. I don't know if we need to get into it, but every time he puts a bite in his food in his mouth, I'm clutching my heart like, God, somebody call 911.
is somebody close?
We should preface with, like, Gabe, do you have a buddy with you just in case?
I don't have a buddy. I have something better. Can I whip something out for the podcast?
Yes.
All right. It's show and tell time. I call this my lifesaver.
Oh my God, I know what it is.
Oh, I've seen that. I saw that on the other commercial. Yeah.
Oh my God. Gabe. Okay, so for the listener, he pulled out one of those like suction cup things that goes over your face and like pulls like a hot dog out of your throat if you choke on it. I actually wanted to get one of those for my kids, but
Yeah. Wait, why didn't you?
no, I plan on it. I'm dying right now because that is like the most perfect thing for you to have.
It's
That puts me at ease, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect. I have a dedicated space in my backpack just for that, and I take my backpack everywhere. Now I don't need a buddy to like save my life.
Oh my God, you can live an independent life. We love it.
Exactly.
We love to see it. Okay, Joey, cherry in a pit.
You know, I should have brought this up earlier. So our 3-year-old or 2-year-old, he threw up. He'll be 3 in October. He threw up in the middle of the night, and when I was taking him back to his room, I stepped in his throw up between my toes. Oh,
But did you have your socks on?
No, I was barefoot. Thank God I didn't. And a cherry is we went to the pumpkin patch yesterday. It was such a good day. We're in Colorado, so it was beautiful. How about you, D?
Okay, so my pit, all you here looking at me will notice that my eyebrows look insane because I got them microbladed again on Wednesday. So they're essentially like tattooed on. It's like a semi-permanent tattoo. So I'll just be looking like a clown for the next 2 weeks, which is fine because it's like Halloween season. So I could just, write it off as like a Halloween vibe. But my cherry is that on, this past week, a few days ago, I longboarded again for the first time in like over a decade. I didn't wipe out. I felt really cool. Like I was living my best self, but I'm sure I didn't look that cool, but that's okay because there's no video or photo evidence. But I plan to get a lot better and keep going. It was a blast.
Sick.
Yeah, it was great.
Did you get a new longboard? Like it's your own longboard?
Yeah, I bought a longboard and I also bought a little skateboard for the kids. And when I say a little skateboard, I mean like a normal size skateboard. And my oldest, Finley, he was rocking it. He was getting frustrated, but he just kept getting back on his board and practicing. So maybe one day he'll be a pro. Who knows? Or just, a regular guy.
or just or just a guy who skateboards.
Exactly.
I mean, those things are hard. I remember trying as a kid, and like it is not easy to pick that up. So
it is really challenging. Okay, let's jump in and put our serious hats on, which I know is never going to really happen with you two because you two like to goof around too much. But Matt, you grew up in New Hampshire. Tell us what it was like. Were you a good student? What did you do? Did you snowboard?
He was a delinquent student. Barely graduated high school. I can answer this one.
Yeah, you wish. Growing up in New Hampshire was very uneventful overall. I was in a pretty squarely suburban town. Definitely wasn't a middle of the nowhere farmhouse like some people imagine when I tell them I was in New Hampshire, but it was, a very suburban area. I think my graduating class of high school was like 400 people, so it wasn't like tiny, but not huge. And I was in the early years, I was mostly just riding entirely on natural ability and like taking pride in not really trying very hard in school. And then something flipped in like middle school where I think for the first time they introduced the idea of like, oh, GPA, there's this way that you can like compare yourself to other people, or maybe it was here's the top 10 students in each area or whatever. And, as we'll probably do some soul searching on throughout this call, I am very competitive and was, I think, even more competitive back then. And so that just lit a fire under my ass. And I wanted to then go and be number one at everything I could be, especially academically. And so that drove me to be a very, very, very good student on paper in high school, was valedictorian of the class, and it was good, but definitely had to learn a lot about transitioning from that mindset into the academic vibe here at Carnegie Mellon, which was very different. And I was definitely not number one material once I got to college.
Matt, I got to ask you, what were your favorite subjects learning?
Oh, probably the ones you would guess. I definitely enjoyed math and science. In high school, I thought I was good at math, which helped me like math. I realized I was actually terrible at math once I got to engineering school. But yeah, in high school, it was chemistry, calculus, and then any like hands-on engineering class that I could get myself in.
Yeah.
So you have a degree in electrical and computer engineering. Was that the major you chose when you went in, or did you go in thinking you were going to do and be something else?
That was the major I chose going in. I think depending on what school I was applying to, I probably picked a slightly different major, but I saw myself squarely being at the intersection of software, which I guess would probably be called computer science at most schools, and then the actual hands-on building stuff, ideally with robots and electronics, was very interesting to me as well. So I definitely made a very conscious choice to not be a computer science student. I wanted to be an engineering student, ideally in robotics, electrical engineering, and so I tried to apply to all the programs that were kind of right in that sweet spot.
You have to tell us when you met Gabe then.
Oh yeah, this is a great one. So and I know you're going to ask us about our fitness histories in a bit here, and so I'm going to jump the gun. But I met Gabe in high school, but he wasn't at my high school. He was at a nearby one, and we went to the same nerd engineering summer camp together. It was like a 6-week, like you live on this private school campus, kind of pretend to be a boarding school student for the summer. And we met pretty early on in that program just by chance, and we hit it off right away. And I think we both drug each other pretty quickly into the other's like respective area of interests and passions, where I was the huge build stuff computer nerd guy who was just barely at the edge of fitness and kind of had like a little bit of an interest there. And Gabe was obviously an amazing athlete and had explored technology and engineering a bit, but not nearly as much as me at that point. And so we kind of drug each other into our respective areas of passion and built a, amazing friendship in the process.
That's awesome. So Gabe, you grew up in Massachusetts. That's a hard one for me to say. Ooh, I got nervous for a second. So tell us about growing up and what kind of student were you?
Sure. Actually, can we rewind for a sec? I just got a flashback. Matt, when they asked about the cherry in the pit, did you think about the rose and the thorn? Remember that?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I was the cherry in the pit specifically threw me off because I hadn't heard those terms before. But yeah,
I hadn't heard that either. But I was like a very relevant thing to the podcast was at that nerd camp. It was like week 1 or week 2. Every week they would ask like, "What's your rose and what's your thorn?" And I realized Matt and I are going to be best friends. And when Matt answered his is like, I just found what was it? My rose was I just found like my new best friend. It's Gabe. And then I just found my new greatest enemy or my new greatest like rival. It's Gabe. And just like everything was a competition for us. And like we nerded out over everything. It was like a really good little microcosm for our dynamic.
Oh my gosh, that is heartwarming. That made me feel like so warm inside. That's so sweet. I can't believe Matt would say something so sweet.
High school Matt was
surprised hearing that now, but yeah, good job, previous me.
He was an affectionate guy. Like he made me and Sky, our third friend, rings in the lathe at our engineering shop.
Matt, what happened to you since then?
I mean, I think you're just jealous that I haven't made anything for you, but it may surprise you to know that I do still care about people and make them think sometimes. Yeah.
No, I know, because we've discovered, Matt, that you and I have a very similar personality type, and that terrified me personally because I've had an existential crisis. And when I asked Matt about it, he said, "I'm proud." I said, "Yeah, okay, well, we can keep talking about it." Okay, so Gabe, let's get back to you. Tell us about growing up. What kind of student were you?
Yeah. So let's see. Definitely was coasting off of like some talent in good old Kingsborough, Massachusetts. Like I knew when I was a kid, I was good at math. I enjoyed doing like the tests where they were testing like times tables and stuff. But I think there was a really big inflection point in middle school where I was very, very unmotivated. Like I did not work hard at anything as a kid. And my mom would step in and like kind of pick up the slack a lot because she knew I had a lot of potential as a student. And she was a really hardworking student growing up. And so 6th grade, I think it was, I was writing this report on Michael Phelps, and this was her like take a step back and take her hands off the wheel moment where she's like, "I'm just going to let you fall on your face and see what happens." And so I finally didn't have my mom holding me accountable. And I, sure enough, fell on my face. I got like the worst grade I'd ever gotten. It was like a 70 or something on a 6th grade essay. And I came home and I cried. Like I was bawling. And I'll never forget my mom, who's this super compassionate, like caring, prototypical mom. Like she is the mom of moms. She just laughed. And I was like, "What?"
I like her. I like her a lot.
Yeah. She was like, "Are you surprised? Like, I can't believe you actually pulled off a 70." And so that was like I guess I actually have to like, put in some effort. I'm not able to just like coast by entirely. So anyway, after that, I started getting more interested in actually putting some effort behind school. And by the time high school rolled around, it was definitely more on Matt's side of like, let me like really optimize my school performance. And I had this other guy in high school. His name was Tim. And I was just constantly chasing this guy, Tim. He ended up having the best GPA in the school's like recorded history. So I never caught him. And he got a perfect SAT score. Just like everything was insane off the charts. He also like single-handedly won this quiz bowl thing, which is like a Jeopardy knockoff for high school. So yeah, there was no way I was going to catch him on just like school smarts, but it was a good rabbit to chase. And then I think like Matt was saying in ASP, the engineering camp we did the summer after junior year, that was the very beginning of me being pulled a little bit away from the like just strict book smarts kind of objectives and more like practical stuff. As we'll probably get into, there was a lot more work for Matt to do to get to the point where we could actually build a company though.
But you were in athletics throughout school as well. So you did swimming, you did track. And was that kind of like your introduction to fitness? Because I know you brought Matt into it. So like, is that how you got into it?
Actually, no. So I think I have a very parallel story to Matt, except earlier in my life where I had my dad who I actually tell the story on interviews a lot, where he is just like this very traditionally masculine dude. Like he's big, he's strong, he's confident. And as like a super skinny, nerdy kid in like elementary school, middle school, like that's all you want to be as a boy. And so I remember like very regularly asking him like, can we work out? Can I lift? Like I saw weights as like the path to that promised land. He would be like, no, we're not lifting until you're 12. And finally, when I hit 12, it was like my birthday. I was like, all right, let's go to the basement and let's lift. And so he taught me the basics, and it was like, and I mean the basics. Like it was, you know, you do some curls, you do some bench press, and then you call it a day. Like it was really, really minimal, but it was something, you know, and it gave me like the sense of progress and the sense of getting stronger. And you couldn't tell, like, it's not like I went to school even a year later, no one knew I was lifting. Like it was not that level of seriousness, but from an identity perspective, it was pretty important because I suddenly was like, I'm a person who like struggles at something. And I don't know if there was a connection between that and school, for example, but I think it was the first thing I ever like worked hard in. And then it was only in high school when that got really serious, where in middle school, I was like into my club swim team and it was like a few times a week type thing. But then high school was like everyday sports every single season. And that was when it was like, oh, there's these guys at the state competition where I want to be among those guys, like, you know, doing well at states. And by the end of high school, like I definitely completely gotten to the other side of like, okay, I am now like one of the serious athletes in the school. I am working out multiple times a day in the pursuit of these goals. And like everyone knows me as a guy who is like extremely fit and like will bring you to the gym if you give him 1 inch of a chance. So that definitely transformed my like identity by the end of high school.
Gabe, I remember our interview really well, and I remember you said that your dad was this huge influence on you, as you said, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, he told you that the two most important things in life are number one, health, and number two, education. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I only realized like many years later that I had internalized that on a very deep level. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Smart and buff. What a combo. Who could beat it? So
I had to convince him that both of those were completely wrong, and we had to go sacrifice our body and our education to build a startup.
Yeah, I had a lot of work to undo.
which brings us to the startup. So Gabe, you go off to MIT. Matt's over at Carnegie Mellon. How does the startup happen? How does Trainwell happen at that time? Delta Trainer, which becomes Copilot, which becomes Trainwell, which we'll get to. But I know you guys have these texts because I've seen images of the texts when Matt has this idea and brings Gabe in. So tell us that story.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at this since I was definitely the one initiating it. We were working the same internship over the summer. And I was having a bit of an existential crisis where I had made a few, you know, I'll call them like student startups or student projects that were kind of startups over my years in college so far. And I had just kind of shut down and sunsetted my most recent project. And I was feeling a lot of anxiety of like, okay, I'm going into my junior year, like now is kind of the make it or break it for either I'm going to say, yep, I have an idea that's good enough that I'm going to go into this right after school, or I have to really start seriously looking at internships and doing interviews with some of the bigger companies and, you know, all the stuff you should do when you're in college to get a job. And so that summer I was like, you know, Gabe will probably remember better than me, honestly. I had like a wall at my parents' house. You know, that meme with the guy with the red line going between all the different things and it's like a conspiracy theory? Like that was an actual picture of me, it turns out, when I was trying to think of the startup idea that was going to be the one that I could pursue for the rest of my life. And
it's still there, right? Like all those.
Yeah, a lot of it is still there. I've never felt compelled to take down some of those papers. I'll send a picture. But one day, as I was driving to work, having all these ideas swimming around in my head, I thought of the idea of, hey, we work out a lot, and there's a lot of these wearable devices like Fitbits that are measuring everything about cardio workouts. But we don't really care that much about cardio workouts. We really care about strength training workouts. Like, why has no one built a Fitbit for strength training? And that was the initial idea. And so, yeah, I pulled out my phone. I texted Gabe. Gabe, I think, just thought I was like getting his opinion or something, but I was already 100% like, Gabe is the co-founder for this company. Like, he is going to love this and we are going to build this, because I needed someone who loved working out and someone who knew machine learning, because I wanted to use machine learning to be able to analyze the motion of users while they were working out and be able to detect what they were doing. So that was the pitch. I texted Gabe, said, yeah, let's use wearables and machine learning to measure what people are doing when they lift. And I think Gabe said something along the lines of, wow, this one's a winner, I can tell, or like something like that was his response, totally oblivious that I wanted him to like work on it, probably. But then, yeah, very quickly, we started being worse and worse interns at our day job and better entrepreneurs in the other hours. And, you know, I definitely fell in love with the idea pretty quickly and knew that it was going to be a winner on some level.
Gabe, when you got that text from Matt, what was going through your head, if you remember?
Yeah, there's a lot of background context here too, like from a personal perspective. Like, I thought it was a really exciting idea. Matt is definitely right. I had no idea like what the implications were, but there was more interest in making it serious than Matt probably knew at the time, because I had some conversations with people in college where Matt and I had worked together on a project in freshman year. And for me, it was a project. And then Matt was he was the entrepreneurial one always. And so he turned it more into a business. And I kind of pulled back. I was like, this is taking away from my school thing. Like, I just need to work on my GPA, keep that good. And then a couple of years of like internships go by, and I'm like, wow, I don't think anything's been nearly as exciting as just like trying to strike out on our own and build something for real. And I was talking with a friend about, actually, who is now my girlfriend, about like, what do I want to do in the long run? Like, I'm just having this crisis over like all these internships are soul crushing. And she was like, well, you have that thing that apparently was like really exciting. Why don't you, do something like that? And so I was spending a lot of time actually thinking about ideas myself. And I also made a commitment to myself, like a very explicit thing I wrote in my journal at one point of like, if Matt reaches out and wants to work on a thing again, you say yes. Like, no matter what it is, you got to figure out a way to find that thing fun. And then when he reached out about this thing, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like this is perfect. It's like Matt said, fitness plus machine learning, like the thing I'm studying plus the thing I do with my free time, plus Matt, like my best friend and this guy that I already tried making a thing with. So it was pretty much a no-brainer of like, yeah, let's try to make this the real deal.
Plus, he needed someone jacked to give him credibility, or else who would buy into this? So, but speaking of buying into it, people did buy into it. What was your first big success with what was at that time, I believe, was Delta Trainer?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it definitely took us a long time to build something that actually resembled a business where there was customers buying a product and we were convinced that there was, real economic potential. But fortunately, I mean, because of all the reasons we just discussed, if you just looked at me and Gabe and how much we cared and how well we got along and how passionate we were, there were a lot of people who were willing to invest in us as individuals and sort of say, yeah, maybe this exact idea or market or whatever is not it. But if anyone is going to figure something out at this intersection of tech and fitness, it's probably going to be these guys, right? And that didn't make it easy, but it definitely opened doors that allowed us to get actual investors to come in very, very early, long before we had something that resembled a true business, and give us resources and time and advice that we needed to get those very first things off the ground. So the very first wins were, successful entrepreneurs who recognized that potential and would write us, a check from their own bank account and say like, yeah, I want to support you guys. Like, let's see what you can do with this. And there were some, the universities we went to supported us as well. I always joke and say that I got more than I paid in tuition from Carnegie Mellon by the time I graduated, by getting them to invest in the business in different ways. And MIT helped us a little bit too, but not nearly as much. And that's not even a joke.
Matt, I mean, being an entrepreneur, right? I mean, it takes some gusto, some cojones. I had my own gym for almost 8 years, and when you go into debt, and like you take that on, like it's your baby. And so if you could share, like, what were and Gabe, you can jump on too with what some big challenges were you guys faced in building this business, Delta Trainer, at the time.
Yeah, you want to take a stab at that, Gabe, or should I go first?
Yeah, I mean, I can go. You definitely had I was definitely following your lead at the beginning, but I think for me personally, the biggest struggle, people thought it was going to be like having no money or like, being completely isolated from everybody, but those were fine. Like, I felt like I'm not someone who's like, who needs a lot of money or needs a lot of social interaction or something. Like, actually just like walling up in our apartment and working on something was pretty awesome. I think by far the most soul crushing part of it was just now the reins of school have been taken off, and where before it was like, here, this week you're learning this thing and we're going to test you on it next. And then you're learning this thing and we're going to test you on it. Instead, it was like, you don't even know what success is. Like, people don't even agree on what it means to be good at whatever it is we're trying to do. And no one's telling you what you're supposed to build. Like, it is a known thing. If you go ask clients what they want, they're going to lead you astray. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, this is such a different world. And so I think there is this sense of being lost and not sure how to find the right way, that continued it wasn't like a 1 month thing. It was like a close to 2 years thing before we even had any semblance of validation of our ideas. So that was definitely the hardest for me.
Yeah, I always tell people, a lot of people always ask or come to me asking essentially, should I be an entrepreneur? Should I do startups, like XYZ, things about my life? And I generally will tell people, you shouldn't become an entrepreneur unless if you truly believe that you wouldn't be content doing anything else. And because it is on paper, as Gabe said, it's amazingly grueling. You're definitely going to make less money than your peers, unless if you happen to be in the 1% that is incredibly successful. So expected value is much lower. And so for me, that was true, where if I was working on a startup, it didn't matter how much risk there was economically. It didn't matter how hard I had to work or any of that. I genuinely look back at those first 2 years of like wandering around in the dark and wondering if anyone was even going to buy our stuff as just incredibly fun, pure, like years of my life. Much more like raw, just passion and enjoyment than today, for example, where there's just a lot of bureaucracy, right? There's a lot of operations, there's a lot of moving pieces. In those early phases, it's just you, your co-founder, against the world, right? Literally. And so there's a certain purity to that I think was very fun and rewarding. It was amazingly hard, to be clear, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
Yeah. Do you think, because obviously the company has evolved quite a lot since those early days. So I'm wondering, like, what do you look back on as the most pivotal moments? Like, whether it's a success or a challenge or, whatever it may be, what do you think were like these standout milestones throughout building this app?
Yeah, I'd say there were 3 like key decision or like key moments that caused us to end up where we are now. For me, the first one is when we moved away from building our own wearable devices and trying to like just build a pure tracking product to deciding we were going to build like a software product as a service. Because to be clear, the initial idea was build a Fitbit, basically. We were going to build our own hardware. We were working with manufacturers in China. We were doing all kinds of electronics design, like very, very different. So throwing all that hardware in the trash can and realizing that was not the best way of achieving what we wanted to achieve. That was number 1. Number 2 was then we were just trying to build software for Apple Watches and iPhones that would help people be successful in their fitness. And we realized that the problem was not that there weren't workout apps out there that could tell people what to do. The problem was a much deeper human problem of people need a lot of accountability and empathy and complex support to be able to be successful in fitness, even if they have the perfect workout plan given to them by an app. And so that is when we decided that having a human expert in the product was the best possible solution to that problem, and that problem was one of the biggest problems in fitness itself. And then lastly, this one is a little more in the weeds, but I think very important, which was even after we decided that we wanted a trainer in the product, we had not decided that we wanted the trainers to be part of our business. We simply knew that there had to be a trainer somehow. And so as software people, the initial idea was go to gyms, go to existing trainers, go to people like Joey who own their own gym at the time, right? And say like, hey, here's some software. Like, how about you use this to train people remotely? And we had one trainer, Nate, who was working with us closer at the time, sort of the first true internal trainer. And we could kind of see side by side, like, here's the quality of the product and the engagement with Nate. And here's the quality of the product and the engagement with, like, we had like 5 or 6 like random gyms and trainers that we were working with in those early days. And it was like, Nate was like absolutely destroying the gyms in terms of like outcomes and engagement and client success. And so we made this we didn't know, I think, how scary and big of a decision it was at the time, but we made this very big decision of, we are going to hire these trainers. We are going to employ them full time. We are going to give them the same benefits that Google gives their software engineers. And we're going to go all in on, we're going to take the hit on cost and margin, but we believe that in the long run, we'll be able to win on quality, essentially. And that has obviously stayed as one of the core theses of the business that separates us from our competitors to this day.
Matt, you hit on a perfect thing there. Like you mentioned, with fitness, like people need empathy, people need individuality, and you share your story with Nate, and you hit it right on the head. You know, as Darian and I, we've been trainers so long, like that's what people need. And Gabe, as you guys are building this business up, okay, and Matt, you just concluded on there with you're starting to build an ethos and some core values. Gabe, what do you feel looking back now that your big core values were then, and have they changed to the core values in today?
Good question. Yeah, I think I remember there's this like very existential moment where we had grown to a point where we felt we needed values established in our company. And like Matt and John and I just like, I think it was like right before Christmas. We just got on a call and we just like hammered it out over the course of like an hour or something. But the first one then was ownership. And I think right now, the first one is ownership. Like it's very clearly, not a surprise for two people who tried to build something out of nothing. Like the only way you get anywhere is with ownership. And so I think one way to analyze like how do you come up with your values is like what grinds your gears the most when people don't exhibit it. And for us, like lack of ownership is just like the biggest red flag, annoying thing to run across. So that's definitely a big one. Let's see. I mean, I'm trying to think through those, and like they're all definitely resonating a lot. Like another one was lightheartedness on the other side of the spectrum, where it's not necessarily going to make you more effective, but it's also just so core to who we are, and kind of parallel to this idea of like, while you better actually make sure you're doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing, this is also a fun thing that like from day one has been a choice that like, you know, we just wanted to work on because we wanted to work on it. And I think lightheartedness was always a big part of that, where, you know, it's serious. It's the thing we put all of our hours into, but at the same time, we want to be able to laugh while we do it. And like, even in our most existential moments, like when we thought we couldn't raise money and we were like going to have to consider the possible end of the company, like we were making jokes about that within a few minutes of that realization. And that's what like allows you to like always get past each of those hurdles and you know, with a smile on your face, like a genuine smile, not like a plaster it on because you need to kind of smile. And there's other values to go down as well, but I feel like those two are probably like the first two that capture the extremes of what's important to the company.
I want to jump in here real quick, D, and say that I'm a big quote guy, and there is little success where there is little laughter. Would you agree, Matt?
It's to be a corny quote guy, but to me, success is like 50% being happy and 50% impacting and inspiring other people. And that's kind of what I boiled it down to whenever I've tried to simplify it as much as possible.
Yeah, I want to call you guys out for something, shout you guys out for something, which is that you were building a company to help people build strength, to get fitter, to move more, with a real focus on the client, the user of the app getting healthier. But additionally, you ended up building a company where personal trainers can have a sustainable career, which is not necessarily something that really existed in this industry before. Like myself, like Joey, so many of the trainers that work at Trainwell, we were piecing together a career. We had some personal clients. We had some fitness classes we taught. Some of us worked at a gym, but some of us were doing, in-person training in people's homes. We weren't getting benefits. Most of the time, we weren't even getting paid a salary. We were working freelance, doing contract work. It's a hard life to piece together, but trainers love the work. We love helping people move more. So you guys did something that was unheard of up until this point, which is that you made a personal trainer an employee, and not just an employee, but a well-treated employee where we have flexibility of our lives. We have salaries, we have benefits. We get to now take that burden of where's my next paycheck coming from and put that into the client, which is what we ultimately have always wanted to do, is just deeply care for and help our clients. And I want to applaud you both for doing that, because I don't know if it's something you realized at the time, like, hey, let's give these trainers a real shot at a career. But that's what you ended up doing. It didn't exist before. It barely exists now. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that. Like, did that occur to you at all?
Yeah, honestly, the magnitude to which that would become important and a sense of, or create a sense of like pride and identity for me in the business, I had no idea when we first made that decision. The decision was really made from a true business perspective of, to beat our competitors, to beat all of these gyms and independent trainers, we need a better product. We can't just be a cheaper, techier product. We need a better product, and the way to make a human product better is to make the human fully supported and bought in to the thing that you're trying to do. And so it was a very utilitarian decision, at least for me at the beginning. But as soon as that decision started actually affecting those very first trainers that we hired, and I got to see and hear those stories, like, thank you for what you just shared, Darian. It's very meaningful to me. It became a huge part of it for me, where I was like, wow, like, I can't believe no other business has done this. Like, to me, it was so obvious to do it at the time for not philanthropic reasons, for business reasons. And so I'm definitely proud that we've found a way of treating people better than, I would argue, any other player in the fitness space, while also winning in the fitness space. And doing both of those at once, unfortunately, is sometimes very hard in business. And so I'm proud of us for being able to strike that balance. And you have no idea how many times I've had to answer to some prospective investor or fellow entrepreneur who'll say, so, when are you going to switch to just a marketplace? When are you going to make these guys 1099s? Like, when are you going to just switch to AI? Most business people I meet are willing to totally sacrifice human quality of life for marginal business gains. And I have definitely formed a strong anti-opinion to that over the years, that if we were to sacrifice human quality of life for incremental gains, then like it wouldn't be worth it to be in business in the first place.
That fact alone, your commitment to everyone who works at Trainwell, to me, is the thing that makes me so passionate about working for Trainwell. It must be like a total trip for you guys to have employees who are like just as passionate and bought into this idea as you guys are. I personally am so invested in this company that when I first heard about it, when it was first brought to my attention, I truly thought I was being scammed, because I was like, there's no way. It's too good to be true. There's just no way. But since joining, the community that you guys have built, the culture that you guys have built, is truly one of ownership and lightheartedness, deep respect. There's not a lot of competition within our company, because it is built on trust and community and support. And that's what, we all do for each other internally. And that's what we're able to give back to the client. So I just want to applaud you guys for that. And I want all of our listeners to know that we don't just care about, making our clients better. That's a huge, huge priority of ours. But we care about the sustainability of this company and all the people that work for it. So, as we close in on time here, I want to make sure you guys get to speak to where you see the vision of this company going. Where do you see Trainwell going? Where do you see the fitness industry as a whole going? Like, how does Trainwell change the landscape of fitness?
Yeah, good question. I feel like there's a few different dimensions of this that are interesting to me. And I think one that's very pertinent to the current time is this idea of AI versus humans. And Matt touched on this a bit when talking about like a question he has to fend off from investors a lot. But I am so excited to see, like, in a world where like real supportive human relationships are already pretty important, how much more true does that become as we get flooded with AI alternatives? And so I think in the coming years, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens when we stick to our guns of like, no, the human that is at the center of our experience is what makes us special, while the rest of the world moves towards, these AI alternatives that are going to be faster, and they're going to have the whole internet at their immediate fingertips, and that is like a very formidable and they're going to be cheaper, and so these are very formidable like challenges for us to run up against. But at the end of the day, they won't be real, and I want to just see how that plays out, where I want to be the bastion of like genuine human accountability and care in the fitness space, and just like, yeah, what does that do for the client experience? What does that do for the actual fulfillment as you're building your new life in health and fitness? And yeah, I'll leave it at that because I know we're short on time.
Matt, we want to hear your take on this.
Yeah, I think I'm most excited about the raw impact piece of what we do. Like, I'm sure there's going to be a million decisions we make that will change the exact form of how we do what we do, or who we serve, or how we get to them, or all these things. But at the end of the day, I work on this because it is an amazing mechanism to impact millions of lives someday, hopefully, across the world. And the level of impact that we have today is already incredible. Like, we, on a daily, if not weekly basis, we will have clients say that we saved their lives or changed their lives. And to me, the most exciting prospect of the next 10 years is, okay, what happens if we take that and we make it better, and then we make it 100 times bigger? And like, you start getting to the point where the thing that was one day just, oh, it's cool, it's fitness, to gym bros working on a startup idea together, becomes an actual mark in history of this was a pivotal moment for like the health of the human race, right? Is that big enough for you? But yeah, like I will never be satisfied with the level of impact we have. So I'm excited to chase more and more.
You guys have made such an incredible impact, and you're, just to speak to what Darian was saying earlier, like your trainers you have under you guys are so committed, and I know that it's all a reflection on how well the leaders of the company also inspire, and you guys foremost are standing as you're spearheading this. So we want to thank you for your grinding, your compassion, your understanding for the impact on the industry. But this transitions me to perhaps our last question here, and I want to ask both of you this, and Gabe, we'll start with you. What legacy do you hope to leave behind through Trainwell?
Good question. Legacy I hope to leave behind through Trainwell is, I think, this idea of access to something that I was fortunate enough to have access to just by having a dad who happened to care about this stuff. I would never phrase it as like, I want to give everyone my dad, that type of thing. But I think in practice, that's essentially how I think about it, where I'm like, this is such a important fundamental to self-actualization and fulfillment kind of thing, that I have such a core belief that it should be extremely accessible to everybody, both from like a not just like a financial perspective, but from like a, does it even exist without tons of hours of sifting through the internet and piecing together your own philosophies. And so I really, really want that to be our legacy of anyone in the world can very easily go and like get their introduction to health and get their guidance and get their accountability and like come out the other side and be like, yeah, I now feel confident in my body, in my fitness, walking into a gym or like being on my own. And so if we can get to the point where at least everyone has that option, I will be extremely satisfied.
I mean, I deeply agree with all of that. In an effort to say something different, I will say on the business side, which is what most of what I am now exposed to on a daily basis, I hope our legacy will be a company that proved that you can win in the long run by consistently putting people above the incremental gains of the business itself. I think there are hundreds of examples probably every day of businesses putting share price, for example, above the livelihood of thousands of their employees. And I think that is the norm today. That is the expectation. And most people don't do that because most people don't make those decisions because they're bad people. They make those decisions because we live in a system where that's the expectation of the business to do that. And I think the world needs more businesses that show that the expectation doesn't have to be a rule, that you can put people above profits and you can still win.
Yeah, absolutely. People first. We love to hear it. One last fun question. What's your favorite exercise, Gabe?
It's the pistol squat, 100%. It's awesome. Like you can do it anywhere. And like, I feel like it's the ultimate
Party
example of independent of what?
Party trick.
Yeah, every party I go to, you'll see me somewhere doing a pistol squat. Like that's a rule. But I feel like it's the ultimate. Oh, let's go, Joey.
Joey's trying out a pistol squat. Okay, he did okay.
All right, now put a bar and 4 wheels on there, and let's see. Yeah, but it's like the ability to do it with one leg. I feel like is for some reason the word independence comes into my mind of like I don't even need that other leg. Like I can use this one leg and still do the same thing, and that's fun for me. But.
I love it. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I'm like Gabe. I'm going to pick an exercise that's actually useful for hypertrophy, and I'm going to go with the dumbbell curl because even if you only train arms, you look like you lift. So got to prioritize those biceps.
That's standard bro response. I love it.
Love it.
Thank you so much, you guys. This was an awesome interview. I really appreciate your time. I know you're both super busy, so it means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Mean more than you know. So thank you both. And thank you for fighting for us. Let's go do this thing.
That's all we have for you today on the Trainwell podcast. We hope you enjoyed our interview with our co-founders, Matt and Gabe.
Thank you for listening. Bye.